Welcome to another episode of Come Together.
Brian Malow, as if as if there was two L's in your last name, but there is one. Great to have you here. Science communicator, comedian, obviously overflowing with enthusiasm and charisma already. Welcome
Obviously.
to the show. How are you? How are you
I'm
today?
good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I have a
How did you
million.
find me? I
Oh,
was trying to avoid you. How did you find me?
I found you with the assistance of Grok, uh, um, where I
Oh,
had
no, I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm known to the AIs already
you are,
at
by
this
the way,
early
I got
stage
I
of
got
their
my first
development.
call. Someone reached out to me, "I found you using AI," and I'm like, "Oh, that's what it feels like." I see. Um, I had done an interview about a month ago with a nuclear physicist and stand-up comic named Kevin Hickerson, and he was I think he didn't as much try to focus on blending the 2 arts as much as pursuing them as, 2 different careers, and then ultimately chose to focus more on the nuclear physics and felt like he had more to, offer than,
Sort of his
in the
Jekyll and
scientific
Hyde
end. Huh?
thing. Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah,
One is a comedian by
that's
day.
right.
No, probably nuclear physicist by day, comedian by night. But why couldn't it be the other way around?
I honestly, I don't know. I don't know. I kinda live my business life like that because most of my podcasting ends up being during the day. I do sales otherwise I work with my dad.
You know what? So when I was growing up, way before comedy was an idea as a career, like I liked comedy,
Mhm.
but like when I growing up, I did have early comedy influences. Like I had George Carlin albums, Richard Pryor, Monty Python albums, and
Sure.
the original crew of Saturday Night Live had an album that was very popular at some point there in the late '70s, and Steve Martin, like, but I uh I hadn't what but I wasn't thinking of comedy as a career. I did like it, and those influences were there, as well as, like, science and science fiction influences, but I had a friend that we started writing songs together, and he was a great composer, and mostly I wrote lyrics to his music, and we were torn because we wanted to be rock stars, but we also wanted to be scientists. We loved physics, especially, and astronomy, astrophysics. So we always thought about that like scientist by day, rock star
By
by
night.
night. And yeah,
Totally,
in the end,
totally.
we became neither.
That's wonderful. Well, I mean, you find a different way to blend it, and actually, I spoke with, I had another guest recently who was a musician first, and then ends up studying, music in the brain and, music with cochlear implants and
Oh,
perception of
really?
music, yeah, and really,
Who was
really
that
cool stuff.
guest?
Her name was Karen Barrett, Dr. Karen Barrett, and, she's a trained classical pianist, and has been studying dementia and neurogenesis and creativity, and one thing that she recently did was creativity with kids, where she'd put kids in the fMRI MRI scanner, I guess, have, background music loop play, give them a keyboard and have them improvise, and let them play music in the fMRI scanner and see which
Yeah,
parts of their brain would light up and which circuits were being activated while they were improvising to
interesting.
study creativity, yeah, like, in a tangible way. Um, it was really, really cool, but she said the same thing. She goes, "I didn't know where my research was gonna take me. I just knew what I loved, and I just had to figure out how to put one foot in front of the next, and then you
You
get
know,
there."
I've given talks to students, especially older students, high school or college,
Mhm.
and where I discuss my path because it was very nonlinear. It
Yeah.
wasn't like, "This is what I always wanted to be," and then I became it. Uh I was always good at science, but I was also good at writing. I liked both the science and the art,
And the
and
performing, I
then
bet.
what's that?
And the performing, I imagine, right?
You know That actually came later. I was kind of a shy kid. Like, I
Oh,
would
yeah?
get nervous if I had to stand up in front of the class and speak. So, although I had dreams of being a rock star with my friend, That was a dream, very fantasy based because I didn't have much stage experience. I did a couple, like, little plays or something, but I didn't have much stage experience until much later. So that's something I actually had to overcome later, and get used to. But I didn't head straight into any of this. I, uh I was a great student, and when I went to college, I went to the university. I grew up in Houston,
Cool.
mostly.
Sure.
Um, actually, so I was born I like saying I was born in Chicago.
Okay.
We moved down to Texas.
Sure.
Then, I went to California and then to, North Carolina, so I don't even know what that means, but, as a Jew, what is this? But that's the path I took. I hit the 4 corners of the country, kind of. Um, but what I'm trying to say there is that, I was, at the University of Texas, I was in this liberal arts honors program called Plan 2, Roman numeral 2,
Mhm.
and I was pre-med at the urging of my Jewish parents, especially my Jewish mother. One of my jokes is that, that's very truthful is, hi like, I very often open with this, "My name's Brian Malow, and, I'm not a doctor, but I play one in the broken dreams of my parents."
There you go.
And then when they laugh, I thank them for laughing, but it wasn't even a joke.
Yeah.
It's a pretty honest statement. But, I was pre-med, and I graduated with a high GPA. I started to study for the MCAT, the test you take to get into medical school, but I knew this isn't what I want. That's not even the science that I like best. I prefer physics and astronomy, and then I was out of school for a year, and then I went to graduate school in TV production in
No
Austin,
way.
and I learned video skills,
Wait. What
but
was
but
what was
while
everyone's
I was doing
reaction?
that I tried stand-up for the first time. There was a funniest person in Austin contest, and I was ready to try it.
Yeah.
And so then I left that and I became a comedian, and then it became science comedian. And so this path, like, but the whole time, kind of like what she said, that previous guest,
Yeah, Karen, Dr. Karen.
I I just sort of was following maybe I was just following the path of least resistance, but if I wanna a more positive take would be I was just following, like, what felt right. It's like, I'm glad I learned this, but, "Ooh, I'm gonna do this now. Now I'm gonna do this." And where I've come to now, I basically use all those things. All of those things are
Yes.
relevant now. I
Yeah.
do I have a nicer video setup here than most people because I'm bringing my video background to it. I'm using a DSLR and a nice microphone and lights and well, the lights aren't really set up, but it looks okay.
Looks good to me.
Yeah, so in the end, I don't know if you've there's a video on YouTube from Stanford University, and it's Steve Jobs giving a commencement
I
speech.
show it to all my high school students every
It's
year.
only about 20 minutes long, and has, like, 3
3
main
parts.
things he wants to
Uh-huh.
talk about, and one of them is what I just said. It's that, like, looking back at my career,
Yeah.
you never knew when you were doing it, but when I look back, it's almost like all those pieces were stepping stones to here. Like, it makes sense when you look back at it, but
Yeah.
it wasn't planned that way.
Yeah. He says you can't connect the dots looking forward, only looking back, and,
Yeah.
you have to have faith in something going forward, and that's passion, the universe, God, whatever it might be.
And then mostly it was following what felt right.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, like following the passion the whole time. I
So,
guess it could lead you astray, but it worked out,
it
where
could.
I get to be and there's a little bit of the teacher in me, so I get to give science first of all, some of my comedy might be a little educational, where I make science subjects kind of fun or funny. I also give talks to help scientists be better communicators.
Which is really
Uh,
important.
yeah, so some gigs that I have, like, I love just performing comedy, but, like, in the summer, I'll have this gig in Germany, and then I'm gonna go to the University of Mainz, Maine it looks like Mainz, but and as part of a speaker series it's like the physics department, and they'll have, like, this colloquium, and most of their speakers are physicists,
Yeah.
but I will be giving a talk on science communication and my path maybe. And, so it's like so I get to use my video skills. Uh, what I do is both art and science
Sure.
and education, and it's just like it involves all these like, the skills I've picked up along the way or developed. So yeah,
I
it's kinda
think
cool.
I have a couple of thoughts and a couple of questions, follow-up questions. Um, First of all, the entire old school of Hollywood was founded on Jews in similar situations to you, whose parents wanted them to be doctors and lawyers, and they said, "Screw this, I wanna do something fun," and they ran off to California and just built
I can make
studios.
movies about doctors.
That's right, that's right. And the other observation that I actually that I had recently, and it's so cool to see this actually apply to you, is I think that creativity comes out best in people when they feel like they're being stifled. I think that that is whether you and that could happen, like, at a cultural level, like, with the whole counterculture world, the '60s, '70s, rock, jam bands, like, the psychedelic and hippie era, that was all born from a group of people feeling, like, disillusioned with their
Mhm.
world, suppressed by the world around them, and, they were just trying to figure out a way to, like, be themselves, and, like, they
Yeah.
exploded into, like, this incredible, culture. Pros and cons, of course, but that happens to people on individual levels too, and to go from being pre-med, getting ready to go to med school, being a science-oriented person, like, I mean, I could even imagine a old school Jewish family if their son came back to them and be like, "Guys, I hate to break it to you, I'm not going to med school. I'm gonna be a physicist." Like, they'll be disappointed
Yeah.
on one hand, but, like, if they come back and go, "I'm taking a year off and I'm going, to movie to design to the film school," what was that react what was their
Right.
reaction?
You know what? You just reminded me of several different things. The last thing you just reminded me of was many years ago, I saw there was a remake of film The Jazz Singer with
Mhm,
Neil
sure,
Diamond, and he was
sure,
supposed to, probably like his father, become a cantor,
right.
but he wanted to be a rock star, and so, he had to break the family's heart. You know, uh, my father was an accountant, and
Mhm,
I think in a way I had more like 100% support from my mother than my father, because my father is like, if you instantly became rich and successful at it, then he's all on board.
sure.
But you know what? That's so that was his concern, and I think my mom was more concerned that you do what you like. And so, um, uh, I know that was tough to it's like such a tease to begin to study for the MCAT and all this and then go, "I'm not doing this. This is what you want, but it's not really what I want." And, that's a hard thing to do sometimes. We people in general in all parts of your life, like, to not be bent by other people's expectations and to realize, "Ah, this is your dream for me. It's not my dream." Exactly.
Mhm,
Um and I hate to break your heart.
yeah,
But 2 other little things you reminded me of. I remember I don't know whatever came of this, but I remember there was a filmmaker in the Bay Area, and he was making a documentary about why there are so many Jews in comedy, way out of proportion to their numbers in the
sure,
population.
sure.
Why do Jews dominate in Hollywood and in comedy in particular is what he was interested in.
Mhm,
And and then, that was always true, and in the recent several decades, other groups
yes,
that are minorities, that have been held down, that have
yes,
been persecuted, also rose up. You
yes,
started seeing way more Black comics and
yeah.
Asian comics and, just people of
In
color and
America,
other yeah.
politically libertarian and right-leaning comics now, which, like, you could de Hey, everyone, real quick, if you're enjoying the show, click subscribe and rate the show 5 stars. Helps a ton. Thanks so much. Definitely say we're definitely considered a minority, especially in the corporate world or whatever kind of world that, like, they definitely, like, for sure, and you see the same kind of rise now. It's
So is
crazy.
there something there because you hear about and during the Holocaust or something like that sometimes some humor is born out of
Yeah,
being repressed or being like art in general, there's this idea that, art in general, any art form is that like, uh comes out of suffering and pain and torture, and that if you had a really messed up childhood, and in fact, like, I wrote a little joke about how I was never abused or even neglected, and, like, I feel like I could have been a much better artist, but I was never abused or neglected, and I blame my parents.
Right.
Because I could have been, why didn't you took too good care of me, I could have been a greater artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andrew Schultz has a very similar joke where he says, "All I have to do to make," he goes, I'm happy I had a girl." He goes, "But it requires a lot more work because if I had a boy to make him great, all I had to do was just ignore him or beat him up every now and then." And he's like, "And then he would have been great, and that would have been the end of it." But
And then so the thing that you said was about, like, where, out of the I don't remember your exact words, but about where what gives
yeah,
birth
the
to some of
feeling of
it.
being suppressed, the feeling of,
Yeah.
like, depression leads to, like, this kind of needing to break out and need to to explode, really.
Well, I've had the opportunity to do a couple really interesting events with, Brian May, the guitarist from Queen, who
Ah.
also has a PhD in astrophysics, but he was working on it before Queen. That's what he was studying.
Was that in the film? Was that in the movie Bohemian, Rhapsody?
Rhapsody, yeah, I
I think
think
it
they
may have been
must have touched
mentioned.
on it because all of them were pretty good students
Right,
in different fields,
right.
and he was studying astrophysics, and he was really pursuing it. He had papers published, he had a co-authored paper in Nature, which is like, wow,
Yeah,
but
that's
then,
yeah.
like, by 1970 or something, he was getting pretty busy with Queen, and he put it aside, but when he was, like, 59 years old, that's the kinda guy he is, he completed his PhD,
Wow.
and so he's Doctor Brian May, and then he was knighted, so he's Sir Doctor Brian May, and he's an animal rights activist and an evangelist and publisher of 3D photography, which is how I
What's
first
3D
met.
photography?
What's that?
What is 3D photography?
Well, like 3D movies and,
Sure.
so and 3D, I wish I had one handy. I almost do, but before 3D movies, there were these classic, like, the stereoscope, where it's, this, like, maybe a wooden device, and you put your eyes up to it, and all it is a simple way of there's 2 images,
Okay,
and one represents the view from your left eye and one from your right eye, and
okay.
the reason we have depth perception is because of having 2 eyes, and our brain builds this 3D world out of these 2 different views, and if you close one eye, or if you lose one eye, you might lose your driver's license because you don't have true depth perception.
Yeah.
Um, Now, like, I close one eye, I still know that those shelves are behind this camera, you know what I mean? Like, there are
But when
other
you close one
cues.
eye, and people
Yeah.
pretend to focus and they close one eye when they're aiming for something, they're really just making it harder for themselves.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, I don't know. But with 3D photography, what it involves is taking 2 pictures from slightly different angles, and
Okay.
then when you see, like, a stereo card that you would place in one of these stereoscopes,
Mhm.
all it is, you would look at a glance, it looks like the same image twice, but
Right,
but just like our 2 eyes, it's 2 slightly different angles, and
right.
then the stereoscope just makes sure that your left eye sees one and your right eye sees the other. When you go to a 3D movie, they might be projecting the 2 different images with polarized light, and light can be polarized in different ways. So, like, one image is being polarized one direction and the other is the other direction, and then you
Mhm.
wear these glasses, and that means this lens only lets you see one set of
Just
images,
the different
and
colors
the other
even or
lens
something.
only lets you see the other
Oh,
images, and
man.
so that's a clever way, and it used to be the green, blue,
Yeah.
same thing, and those different lenses, these are all just ways of serving up one image to the left eye and a slightly different image to your right eye, and then you can have 3D, whether it's film or like a little stereo card. And
So
anyway, so this was all to say, Brian May and this astrophysics physicist friend of his started an event called Starmus. It's like star and music,
okay,
Starmus,
okay.
Muse, And every year or two, they'll have one of these events, and they have astronauts and scientists and musicians and artists.
That's
It's
so
all about
cool.
art and science, and
Wow. Where is it?
it moves around. I did
Nice.
it once in Zurich, and I did it once in Bratislava, Slovakia, and there's one coming up later this year in Spain or in
Wow.
Tenerife. So this was a lot to get to the point relevant to what you said, because one of his friends that's involved on the board of Starmus is Brian Eno, great musician, producer, and I I overheard I was sitting in and listening to a conversation between Brian, and it was the year this Apollo 11 documentary came out, it was in 2019. It was the
Okay.
50th anniversary of Apollo 11's landing on the moon,
Mhm.
and so the guy that did the music for the documentary was talking to Brian Eno. They're
Yeah.
talking about music, and Brian Eno said something really interesting. He said that sometimes when he, like, downloads some music app and plays with it, and there's a free version
Mhm.
that's hobbled, and then there's a premium version that has all the bells and whistles. He likes to start with the free hobbled version because it forces you to work within limitations. It doesn't do all the things the fancy version does. Let's see what you can do when we force these limitations on you before he goes and he plays with the full one. And it's like, it's just, you see the connection there? It's like, oh, like how can it force you to be creative by really limit, like, if you were told you're a great artist, but, you can only use a pencil instead of all your paints,
Right.
or you can only use charcoal, or, like, all of a sudden,
Right.
well, what can you do with this limitation? And you see what people do with all sorts of crazy limitations.
It's incredible. It's really yeah, and and that's how you get some of the coolest inventions, and, but you need and this is actually something that I also wanted to talk to you about, 'cause I was running through some of the YouTube videos that you have, and one common theme I saw a lot was about the repeating the expression, about not growing up, and
Am I
and
right? I haven't noticed this.
I saw that a bunch. It came up a bunch, and one of the thing but I think that and a lot of the great creatives, the great communicators, the real they always say they're always saying things like getting older, but don't grow up, and like, and I think what they generally tend to try to say or imply is that growing up is more of a mindset of like, I get how things work, and, like, I've understood the world, and now I'm gonna navigate within the world that I understand, and not growing up is still looking at everything like it could kinda be broken and put back together again, and it gives you a lot more room for, play and for playful kind of whether whether it's learning or science or, different experimental forms of comedy or whatever it is that you're gonna be doing.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some of the values of that kind of mentality and how we yeah, why it's necessary to adopt it?
Well, so interestingly, I when I give science communication talks, I usually call my talk "A Science Comedian's Guide to Communicating Science." And I draw from a little bit from my experiences as a comedian, but then also now years of being a science communicator. So it's not just that. But I started seeing all sorts of connections between comedy and science and comedians and scientists. So
Okay.
obviously, when you talk about not growing up, comedians are an obvious group of so immature and not g always being silly and lighthearted but, you know, that's so a slightly negative that's all like, almost like, critical take on it, but there's also the not growing up and not losing your childlike wonder with the world, and
Right.
scientists are very much like that. A scientist might dedicate not only their career, but their life to, like, understanding, "Why does that bug do that? Why are look at that weird," like, noticing something that most people when you grow up you start paying attention to more important things like your mortgage and your children and you might lose that childlike wonder. You get hardened by life and all, but, anyone that can hang on to that, you can have a little of both.
Mhm.
You can mature a little bit, but still look at the world through these fresh eyes and the joy and the wonder of that childlike wonder. And so scientists and, there's this other connection that I feel like both scientists and comedians, um see patterns and connections. Like, sometimes you hear a comedian there are different kinds of comedy. Like, sometimes a comedian says stuff that you're just like, "That's crazy, I've never heard anything like that." And other times, it's that sort of, "Oh my god," like, it's like, "I have noticed this before," but a lot of times, comedians notice things that we haven't noticed before. It's
Sure.
like, "Oh my god, I never connected that," and you might make an analogy, and if I connect it to this, and you go, "Wow," so I saw a connection that no one saw before. And scientists also, many science discoveries are that same thing. It's everyone has looked at this for thousands of years, and you're the first person to notice this strange little thing and make a connection that's towards understanding. So I think that that's kind of uh that says that it's important to not grow up in a way, that
Yeah.
it's important to sometimes see the world with those childlike eyes,
Yeah.
and don't let that get beaten out of you by, some kind of formal education or some kind of experiences and the need to deal with life.
Yeah. It's important to be a little heretical every every now and
Yeah.
then, especially as an Orthodox Jew, right? Yeah. I, get myself in a little bit of
Oh,
trouble
are
every
you
now
you're an
and then.
Orthodox Jew?
Yeah, well,
You know what's funny? Yeah, I have some I've done a lot of Jewish shows over the years, and I've always had some Jewish material, and one of the things that was me is like, well, is that, people know, like, that there are different degrees of Judaism, like
Yeah.
murder. Like, so there's Orthodox Jews, and I go, they follow, like, 714 commandments. No, I'm sorry, that's how many home runs Babe Ruth hit, but, a lot. And then
Close
there's,
knit.
like, conservative Jews that are like the porridge in the middle, just right. And we were reformed Jews, like the criminals. And what
That's
that
right.
meant is, like, we would take off school for the Jewish holidays, but we wouldn't go to temple, we'd go to Galveston, the beach, you know?
Right.
So, we observe the holidays from a distance.
Sure.
Yeah,
From a distance. From the beach.
yeah.
Excellent.
Um,
It's too funny, by the way, because, yeah, totally. I love all the flavors have been
you
so
know
much
what? One of
fun.
my simplest jokes that I can't believe I've never like, 2. One is not being very religious, I'm just sort of Jewish.
Right.
Which many other comedians have come up with that joke, it turns out.
Yes.
But one that's almost as simple as that, and as far as I know, I've never heard anyone else I tried to
Perform that?
research like, sometimes you go, see if anyone else wrote this joke before, and it's that, 2 Jews walk into a bar mitzvah.
Okay, there you go.
It's, like, it's so obvious, it's just 2 Jews walk into a bar has been said a billion times,
Sure.
and, like, mitzvah. I just throw,
Yeah.
like, that one word that changes it. Yeah,
It's fun. It's
old
fun, it's
jokes,
fun. That
man.
by the way, that's the type of comedy that speaks to me the most is I like to be led down one path expecting
Oh, yeah.
something, and then I love to have the rug pulled out from under me
Oh,
and, like,
yeah.
you know,
That's just good writing, and that's just
it
like, it's
is.
surprise. A lot of comedy is about surprise,
Sure,
and
yeah,
if you can
and there's,
change just one word, yeah.
the comedian Sam Morril had a great line where he goes, "This content's not gonna go well with this crowd." He's like, "But structurally, it's a great joke, trust me." He's like, like, "They
That's
might not
funny.
like the material, but, like, I've worked on this, like, we put the work into it."
Yeah.
It's important.
There was this most people nowadays only know Woody Allen now for other stuff, but for his film career, but he was an amazing stand-up comic in his early days, and
Mhm.
his stand-up was mostly just squeaky clean and brilliantly funny, and one of his simple little jokes that is, like, perfect example of this is that he pulls out this pocket watch, and he goes, "This is a great watch. My grandfather, on his deathbed, sold me this watch." And you're like, what's great about it is, like, you hear what he's saying, and then you're like, you know what he's gonna say. He's gonna say his grandfather gave him so you totally know what he's gonna say, and then one word switches the whole thing.
Yep,
And
that's right.
that's brilliant writing. And one other example is, there was she's still around, I think it's crap. Is it Elaine Boozler or oh, I might be confused. I think it was Elaine Boozler. Brilliant joke where she said, "I have no kids. Well, at least none that I know about." And what's great about that is a thing that men have said forever, and
Yeah,
it's kinda funny, mildly amusing. And she realized that if a
be
woman
so much
said it
funnier.
and you don't even change one word,
Yeah,
you don't even change a syllable, you say
yep,
the exact same thing, but put it in the mouth of a woman, and it becomes a much funnier joke.
yep, for sure. I did a podcast
It's either Carol Leifer or I think it was Carol Leifer or Elaine Boozler, I'm confused now. One of those
okay.
great female comics. Yeah.
I was saying I did a podcast with a gentleman that's a Bob Dylan scholar last
Really?
week. Yeah, really cool. We had a lot of fun. I never did an hour and a half talk of just about Bob Dylan, but it turned out to be more fun than I thought it would be. And one thing that we talked about was and he writes about this actually in a book that he wrote, but that the voice and the way that it's said has everything to do like, he basically was discussing delivery, and obviously to stand-up comics, it's one thing, and to musicians, it's almost the same thing, but in a very similar tone, you can say the same sentence 5 different ways, and I learned about that in Shakespeare class because, we in college, I was a creative writing and literature major, and I'm in my Shakespeare class, and I'm not looking forward to it because I was in the degree for the writing, not for the literature, and, and then I s and then the teacher made, like, 5 or 7 different people get up and deliver the same line in their own way,
Yeah.
and that's when, like, that's when my whole perception of what writing and performing just immediately shattered, and I was like,
Right.
this d and then I have a uncle that used to work for ABC, and so he used to get screenplays sent in to vote for best script, and he'd give them to me, and I'm reading these screenplays, and I'm watching the movies after I read them, and I'm like, "This screenplay was so much better, what are you talking about over here?" But, like,
Right.
it's all about like, it's all about the delivery, and it's all about the way that you embody and not only are you embodying the idea, but you're also turning it into your own thing, and then you're sharing that with everyone else as well, the way that you're gonna deliver
Yeah.
these jokes is coming through your like, who Brian is, like, it's, like, flowing through you, and I'll say the same line, but, and I'll try to embody you, but end up doing it my own way, and, like,
Right.
that'll hit totally differently, and that's what makes things fun.
There was this great independent film called Passion Fish.
Okay.
I think John Sayles might be the director, but Passion Fish and that McConnell, what's her first name? I don't know if you ever watched Battlestar Galactica. She was the president, or do you remember
No.
that? I can't think of her first name. But in this, there's this scene where an actor is describing an audition, and it was just one line. And they were like really obsessing over how to say this one line,
Right, right.
all the different reads, the line, it must have been a UFO thing they were auditioning for. And it's like, I think the line is, "I didn't expect the anal probe." And they're going, "I didn't expect the anal probe. I didn't expect the anal probe." You know? "I
Yeah, sure.
didn't expect the anal probe." I didn't expect like, then they're just obsessing, like, what's the perfect read of this one line?
I didn't expect the anal probe,
Exactly,
everything
yeah,
else went
pause,
according to plan,
there's
I
so
just didn't
much you can
expect
do
that.
with it. Yeah. And I've
Uh,
actually seen, I've seen videos talk about, like, actors, like, directors talking about actors and just doing surprising reads. I think there was some video I saw a director talking I think about Christopher Walken
mhm.
and how time each take, he did, like a shockingly different take, and
Yeah.
you're like, "Oh my god, that was perfect," and then, "Let's do it again," and he gives this completely where he brings something else to the scene, but the words are exactly the same. It
Incredible.
yeah.
Incredible. What, so, speaking of heresy, which is how we even got here, you
Finally, a
gotta.
subject I no.
Yes, well, I mean, I think most creative people have a healthy dose of heresy to them, and like, why can't I do it this way? A little bit of defiance in that kind of way, and that and I think that what you said is extremely true. That scientists and stand-up comics have to both have, this real different way of looking at things, but they're in common, they're in stepping in line with one another, and there's something about, I want, and maybe you could speak to this, the content when you're delivering a joke, you can say things that you cannot get away with in any other context, and it can be something that everyone was thinking that no one is willing to say, and there's something about the fact that you're protected by this, like, moment where you're like, "Hey, I'm on a stage with a microphone, and the purpose here is to laugh, so, like, if you don't laugh, I'm sorry, but, like, it's all in this spirit," but you can really, really effectively, uh, teach, like get different things, different points across that people would not be able to hear in any other context. Do you agree with that? Or can you give me some examples of
Oh,
some, some ideas of that?
absolutely, on stage and off. I've always known that, that I could get away with saying some stuff, and some of it has to do with your personality. Um, and on stage, this goes on stage and off, um that I can say something that might sound mean, but, like, the way I say it and the smile that I
Yeah.
flash, like, I'm not serious, and, I had a line where I was talking like about just getting really frustrated with beautiful people. It was talking about an old VH1 scene on VH1, a video with Ricky Martin and Christina Aguilera and how
Mhm.
over the top beautiful both of them are. And I would start the thing by saying to the audience, um, "I've started getting really frustrated with beautiful people. I don't mean anyone here." And then, so, like, I would say that kind of under my breath, which is, like, insulting the entire audience. But that's just it's an absurd of course I'm not insulting the
Sure.
whole audience. That's just a
Sure.
joke. And, um yeah, this applies all the time. We can get away with stuff. Although it can also backfire. In comedy, it's like there's this thing where comedians have caught some flack for things they've said on stage, where it's almost as if, well, you're quoting him like that's just something he said off stage and in not even in an interview, a comedian might be being funny, but you can't always quote a comedian and go, "Look what he said." It's like he was on stage in the middle of a comedy routine when he said that, and
Mhm.
so maybe there's some context and stuff that you go, "It wasn't a horrible thing he said, he was just being funny and sarcastic." Like that, like when I dismiss the whole audience as not, "Don't worry, I'm talking about beautiful people, this doesn't apply to any of y'all." Um,
Right.
that's like, obviously, I'm not being that big of a dick, I'm being I'm just kidding, I'm teasing, pulling your pigtail, and it's okay. Um, to bring it over to science, though, as far as heresy, because oh, yeah, you can get away with a lot. I think there's more to say on comedy, but the first thing I thought of was, uh, I have a relationship I've been working with this meeting in Germany called, the Lindau. Lindau is a town, it's like Linda with a U at the end. The
Okay.
Lindau Nobel Laureate meeting, and every year, this is their 75th year,
Whoa.
they bring in a couple dozen Nobel laureates. But this year for their 75th anniversary, it's gonna be 75 Nobel laureates, I think, and 600 young scientists that have been
Wow.
carefully curated from all around the world, maybe 90 countries.
Nice.
And it's all about mentorship. It's really an amazing organization and meeting, and I've been privileged to be a part of it for 10 years. They hired me to perform 10 years ago, but for fun, I was walking around interviewing scientists, and that led to conversations. So I've never performed at the meeting a second time, but I come in, they hire me to do good interviews, and I'm not even being a
Wow.
comedian. I'm just giving good interviews. I might be funny, but I'm not there to be a comedian. I'm there to be a good interviewer, which I love to do. Talk to these young scientists, talk to Nobel laureates. So I've had the opportunity. So in the course of 30 years or so, I've interviewed a lot of scientists and authors and other interesting people. There's a guy, a Nobel laureate out of Israel. His name is
Cool.
Danny Shechtman,
Okay.
and he came up with something. He discovered something called quasi crystals. And what his words were, this is something that shouldn't exist. It was forbidden by the literature. Like,
Cool.
there are forms of matter that like crystals are a kind of matter, and, we got gas,
Mhm.
liquid, solids, we have crystals, but this idea of quasi-crystals, he said, was forbidden by the literature. So, it would be heretical to
Mhm.
say that this is like and like often happens when a comedian or filmmaker or musician is ahead of their time and isn't appreciated till later.
Yeah.
Some scientific discoveries, it was like there was so much resistance. And at the
Yeah.
time, the most famous chemist in the world was Linus Pauling. And he was like a double Nobel Prize because he had won a peace prize and a chemistry prize, I think. And he was very opposed to this. It was like, "No," and he even said, "There are no quasi-crystals, only quasi-scientists."
Oof.
He was rude about it. And
Woo!
and then he had the nerve to die before Danny Shechtman was validated and won the Nobel Prize. He
He got
turned
the
out to
last
be
word
right.
in.
Yes,
He
he
checked
did,
out
but
first.
unfortunately, Pauline wasn't there to have it rubbed in his face, but he's like, how rude to say of some young scientist, and he was wrong, and he
Yeah.
was wrong, and
Yeah.
so, yeah, so he had this heretical idea and it turned out to be true,
Yeah.
against all this resistance that he had to keep pursuing the research when I'm sure he was told, "Stop this line of research, you're wasting your time."
Yeah. So that brings me to, I think, a really important and relevant question in today's world, which is that institutions are like objectively pretty much have collapsed as far as public, trust of them have go. Whether it's universities, whether it's public health, whether it's government, like no one seems to like banks for sure. Obviously, like no one trusts like anyone or
The
really
health
anything
insurance
anymore.
industry.
Yeah, it's a dangerous place to be. It's a dangerous place to be nowadays. From a patient's perspective or from a management perspective, and and there's and I think one of the reasons why is because the institutions had overplayed their position of authority, and the people that were quoted as heretics for a lot of things, you know, are turning out to have turned out to be correct, and like, there's great memes going on the internet of like the 2016 conspiracy theorists and like 2024 news or 2025 news trying to catch up with them and all this cute little shtick. But how do we how do you think you could people can be discerning about like an idea that's really interesting, even though it's heretical, or an idea that's heretical because it's lunacy and craziness? Because that's really going to be the real issue that I think that everyone's coming up with AI and and social media and like this collapse of faith in any kind of objective institution. Like, what do you got to do? You think it seems crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is a terrible challenge these days. There is so much misinformation out there. And, with the rise of social media and all these platforms, it's incredible. It's this thing that each new technology, we think about the promise. How television, oh my God, it's going to revolutionize education and the world and all of this. And in some ways it does. But then there was this I have a line I wrote that is like, "Unforeseen consequences are very hard to predict,"
Yeah.
you know, by their nature, and the thing is, they come with that, they're like, you go social media, right at the beginning, it's like, "Oh, wow, some of these platforms," it's like you can connect with people, you know, maybe you're into some little niche thing, and in your town, there aren't many
Yeah,
people into it, and all of a sudden, you found your people spread around the world thanks to this platform, whether it was email or a social media platform and a group. So there are all these positive aspects, but holy crap, we've seen from previous elections all the way it could be abused for spreading we live in a world where there's really bad actors spreading bad information on purpose,
yeah,
and
everywhere. By the way, I wanna make it
everywhere.
clear, both spectrums, literally everywhere. It's
And
crazy.
then even short of the really evil bad actors, we have other people in, like, health science, so much misinformation and anti-vax stuff and flat earthers and moon landing deniers, and where somebody with a microphone starts speaking authoritatively on this subject filled with misinformation, and
Yeah,
yeah, it's very problematic because so often something I notice about conspiracy theories is that so often when you don't know better and you hear one of these
yeah,
conspiracies, you're like, "Oh, wow, oh, it sounds very compelling and it could be true."
yeah,
But then when you hear someone explain like
yeah.
the moon landing ones are very frustrating. It's just so and part of it is, like, most older people like, it's a newer phenomenon because an older generation that's my age or a little older we were all there for it and experienced it, and now you have young kids who think we couldn't possibly have had the technology to do that, and it's like, "Yeah, we did." I know it seems like it was ancient times to you, but it really wasn't, and we could do things like this, like some of but like one of the dumbest moon landing ones is I'm sorry if you're a moon landing denier,
No, I'm
but
not.
one is
I'm
about
not.
they'll go, "How come in all these photos on the moon, you don't see the stars?" And then some people go, "Right, it's because it's in a studio." It's like these things never make sense for multiple reasons because if NASA wanted to, don't you think they could have added stars to the image if they had to fake it? You know what I mean? Like, they would but it's just like it's like, "Yeah, how come you can't see any stars? There's the black sky, why don't you see any stars?" And but and it sounds compelling if you don't know a single thing about photography. But if you know anything about photography, you go, "Oh, well, that's because the surface of the moon is really bright,
So
and you have
what
to
people have been saying is about the flag,
waving." Yeah,
the
that's a
waving
tougher
flag.
one. That is like so some of these sound compelling. Like this one is just photography. If you shut the lens down to so that the bright
Yeah.
surface is exposed, it's just like when you walk outside at night and your eyes haven't adjusted, you can't see the stars yet. And if there's a light in your eye, you will not see the stars if it's
Oh,
bright.
interesting.
We
So
don't
when
see
you're
the
taking the
stars in the
picture.
daytime here
Right,
because
right,
it's
right.
too bright and they're not
I never
so
heard
it's like
I never heard the star argument. The main one that I heard was
oh,
the
it's
flag
one of the
and,
most common ones.
that
The
yeah.
flag one and do you know okay, so
I
that's
don't
it's like, how
yeah.
come the flag moved if there's no air? And it's like, it's vibrating. They stuck it in the ground and there's no air to slow it down even. So
Oh,
they did this
interesting.
and it's just flopping a little because the thing is
That's cool. That's
moving.
a good by the way, but how come that answer I never heard that answer.
Oh,
No
really?
one ever said that.
Here's another one
There's the
that's
information
very
vacuum that
frustrating.
we're talking about this off camera, we're saying that that there's information vacuums with a lot of this stuff,
Yeah,
and I've
and
come
it's
to
so hard, and I don't know the answer because to your basic question, it's like, what do we do? Because it's a matter of who you trust for information. This is
right,
a political thing, and it's also could be anything. If
it could be
you
anything.
if you decide Anthony Fauci is evil and a liar, and then it's like whereas the entire scientific and medical establishment think he's an amazing guy that's done all this good, and these other people think he's supposed to be in prison, it's like somebody's wrong about this.
Yeah, but there's objective ways that you can measure that, right? Like, you can match up the word to the record, you can ma like, there are ways that you can, like, do basic fact checking, and I think what you're saying is correct that people tend to jump to political conclusions before they even bother doing that type of homework, and so you just say you kinda hop on a bandwagon and
Yeah.
say Fauci's good, Fauci's
And but
bad.
it's like, who do you choose? If I choose to trust this YouTuber, then I just it's like same with
But
climate
that goes back
change
to
and
my
stuff.
sta but
People
that goes back to the
decide
original
who they're gonna
question.
trust.
But that goes back to the original question, which is that with with the collapse of institutional faith, right? Because people have been feeling let down, then
Yes,
like how do you then how do you know which institutions are BSing? Because
I
certain ones
know.
certainly do, and and there's certainly no question about that. How do you like, again, the best things that conspiracy theorists can possibly have is evidence because then it validates their case. I say this, it drives me crazy about, Candace Owens' show in particular because I think that she I don't have patience to listen. The 2 or 3 times I've tried, the thing I've noticed that really struck me was she dissects information remarkably well and puts it back together incredibly poorly. So she's really, really good at, like, poking holes, examining things from different perspectives. That inquisitive mind is very, very valuable. The question is, how do you put the pieces back together? I listen, and especially now because Israel and Judaism and everything has been in the limelight of society really, really in the last couple of years. Um, I listen to people go on different podcasts, Julian Dory or Joe Rogan or, whoever it is, Lex Friedman, and you hear people say things, and as an Orthodox Jew that has experience with the Orthodox community, I'm like, again, the premise of what you're like, there is, like, grains of truth in what you're saying, but, like, I don't know where you're getting this information from and who's teaching you this, and so and only when I noticed how strongly the reality deviated as far as, like, Judaism goes from, like, what the way that the information is being presented in the public was the first time that I really said, I could really see how people are really fooled by conspiracy theories because they're
Yeah.
grounded and dressed up and even presented with some with truth. There is some truth in some of the information, but it's just not true, and
Yeah.
the shards of evidence doesn't put it all together necessarily.
There's a good point in there is that, um, the best conspiracy theories, they start with this little nugget of truth,
Uh-huh.
but then they veer off, but
Yeah.
there's this little bit of truth at the beginning, and, like, one of the
Right, like with
other
the
s
flag, you said that's a good question. When you said the flag, that's a good question, that's a little
yeah.
bit of truth. Good question, right? Like, good
That's
statement.
the
There
thing,
is an
so many
answer,
of
right?
them, when you hear them, you go, "Oh," another one is that the shadows on the moon,
Yes, that's what I was gonna ask
they're
you
not
about
all
too.
parallel,
Yeah,
and you go, "If there's only one light source, the
which is the
sun,
sun,
then they
right.
should all be parallel, but this is in a studio, and that's why." But you know what? There's this that sounds so compelling,
Mhm.
but you apparently haven't looked very carefully at shadows on Earth.
I'm
They're
not a
not all
photographer.
parallel. Like, first of all, topography has an effect, but more importantly, it's perspective. When you look at a highway
Uh-huh.
and the 2 sides of the highway seem to get closer and closer in the
Fair.
distance,
Yep.
those lines don't look parallel, but they are parallel. And the same is true, like, I've seen someone demonstrate this with the lines in a parking lot,
Okay.
that if you look at them from here, they all look like they converge, and
Yeah.
that's perspective, and then if you take a drone and fly up and look directly down, you'll see those lines are parallel, but from
Uh-huh.
the angle you're looking, they're not. But when you hear this, you go, "Oh my god, you're right, all those shadows, there must be more than one light source."
Mhm.
No, it's like, it sounds so compelling, but you didn't realize, no, no, look carefully at Earth and you'll see the same thing. It's like
So our conversation, Brian, I think this is so great, and I think this is so important, right? Because there was 2 we just had between in the last 10 minutes or 5 minutes, the 2 of the same conversations, but one is gonna win people and one's gonna lose people, right? One of them is saying one of them was your argument, for example, with Fauci was like, all this entire scientific community trusts this guy, and like a bunch of YouTubers don't trust him. That argument, for what I've seen in the last couple of years, will not win people over change people's conspiracy minds, right? Because that is depending on the reputation and the institutions, like we said, the trust has dropped. So until that trust is re-earned, But the way it is re-earned is by the second half of our conversation where you say, "I understand why you would think that, because
Yes.
the shadows are this way, that this is what it is. Let me explain in detail with examples of how that's not necessarily always the case." And then now you could put the information together and you can understand yourself how that's not true, rather than having to rely on the good word of people that you might not trust, or a crowd you
Yeah.
might feel left out from, or anything like that. Like, it gives you much more to work with.
Two things about that. One, is that yeah, it's a shame that we've lost faith in the institution, or don't, let's not say institution, but expertise. It's
Yes.
like,
Yes.
so okay, some of these flat earthers, you're telling me that you think you're smarter than Einstein and Stephen Hawking and Isaac Newton. You think that your knowledge of the universe and physics, and on top of that, I love thinking this. It's like most of these people, I'm not being mean when I say, you know, you weren't good at science in school. That's obvious from what you've written here. It's very obvious that you weren't good at science. You didn't like
Uh-huh.
science. And yet here you are thinking you know the science better than Einstein and Newton and NASA and everything. And it's like, what is it that and it's that you've heard of the Dunning-Kruger uh, effect
No,
where like,
please explain it.
it's this famous thing in psychology where people who have a little knowledge of something sometimes overestimate how much they
Mhm.
know about a subject. And there's the corollary is like a lot of times people with a lot of knowledge, what comes with that is knowledge of your ignorance. And so like
Yes.
sometimes so scientists are always pretty careful about how they say things. They go, in all likelihood, they are always qualifying things because that's how science is. It's like,
It's the
we know
best
to the
it's the best
highest
information with the best
percentile
data
this is
set you have.
true, but we
Right.
admit that some things change over time that we learn.
Mhm.
But, and so there's this thing where people think, how do you think you know more than it's like, where did you get this idea? And I know you were bad at science. Here's a good let me tell you one other like space denier one,
Please.
because it's so funny to me, but not fun. I don't really mean funny, it's frustrating. There's this thing, have you ever noticed that almost any rocket launch that's going into orbit, the rocket takes off, and then it's going up, and then at some point it starts
Curves.
curving.
Yeah.
Well, the flat earthers and science and moon landing deniers and space deniers, they all say, "That's proof." It's like, "Look, it's curving and it's going to land way over there. It's gonna go land
I never
somewhere
heard that
out of
argument.
sight."
That's what's so funny.
And here's the irony is, oh, you're not understanding a very basic fundamental thing about orbits and rocketry. If you go straight up and then cut your engines, you'll fall straight down. What an orbit is, and we've known this since Isaac Newton, hundreds of years. Like if you shoot a bullet at a certain speed, it'll travel pretty far and then fall, and it's
Mhm.
falling the whole time.
Right.
If you shoot it faster, it'll fall farther away from
Right.
you.
Right.
And Newton realized if you shoot it fast enough, that the rate that it's falling, the earth is curving or under it. If you shoot it fast enough, you'll hit yourself in the back of your head. It'll keep going. And that's what an orbit is. An orbit is about the sideways motion. The reason every rocket does that is because you have to achieve a certain, like 17,500 miles an hour sideways.
Right.
That's why they turn sideways, because that's what an orbit is. So when somebody says, "That's so stupid," you people that understand go, "Oh my god.
But why don't people
This
just
is fun.
respond by
This is
explaining that the way
easy.
you
This is
just the way you
hundreds of
just did
years
it?
old science. This is basic. This is what an orbit is, and you're misunderstanding it." And it's frustrating.
So why is that not just the answer every time? Like, I think that because
It
I think
is, but they never learn. But also, here's the other thing I wanted to say that you pointed
please.
out is like, for science and for communicators in general, science, health, medicine, anything, sometimes when people are against GMOs or people are against this or any new technology, there's a tendency to berate them and go, "You're stupid for thinking that." and that's not gonna win over
Anyone.
someone. But what you were saying is like you go, "Oh," like I would say, "Oh, when I tried this. I went into some Facebook groups that are flat earthers,
It's dangerous.
and I went in optimistically thinking that I could
Oh,
educate someone.
no.
And so here's what happens. Yes, every time that happens, you have
Okay, you
people.
can't do it on the internet. I don't mean the internet, because the
Yeah, I
internet's a
know.
dangerous
Well, I know.
place.
But what happens is it ends up degrading into, well, you're just stupid. No, you're
Yeah,
stupid.
yeah, yeah.
Sheeple, you're stupid for believing this. But I would get excited and go, "Oh, you don't understand what an orbit is and what an interesting, beautiful thing," because, like, the moon is orbiting the Earth,
Yeah.
and or the space station is orbiting the Earth, and it's like, they're falling the whole time. You know how some people think when you're up in the space station, you're beyond Earth's gravity? You're not beyond Earth's
No.
gravity. Earth's gravity holds the moon. The sun's gravity holds Pluto. You know, it's like you're not beyond gravity. You're in free fall. The moon is falling towards the Earth, but it's also moving sideways, so it's always missing. And
Oh,
that's
wait.
what's so it's this beautiful thing. The space station or the moon is endlessly falling around the Earth. So it's always in a state of free fall because it's
Is it getting it
falling,
gets
but
closer
it's
though, no?
moving.
Does
Well,
it gets
no, because for
Oh, because the
every
sun's pulling it back out?
what?
I'm sorry. I wanna just make sure I'm understanding how things work for a
Yeah,
second, right? So far
yeah.
what you're saying. So you're in Earth's orbit, and Earth is the huge mass that is keeping you kinda sucked in from drifting out to space forever, right? Maybe?
Well, yeah,
I don't understand.
yeah.
I'm asking to make sure I understand correctly. I'm asking, yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, here's what would happen if all of a sudden you turned off the gravity.
Gravity, yeah.
What the moon or the space station would do. This is Isaac Newton's laws of motion that an object, if it's not acted on by any force, it'll either stay
Continue, right.
motionless or in motion, uniform motion. So if you turned off the gravity, what they would do is here they are orbiting. As soon as you turn it off, they would just shoot off in the direction in a straight line. But what's
It
happening is they
Yeah.
wanna move in a straight line that way, but the Earth is pulling them down.
So
So
you need
they're
propulsion.
moving really fast and bending, and they're constantly being
Uh,
pulled
uh, uh,
towards the
uh,
Earth.
uh, uh.
So it's falling, but it's missing because of that 17,000 for the space station, because it's different at various heights.
Gotcha.
So at the station's level, about 17,500 miles an hour sideways perfectly matches the speed you're falling at. So you're
Uh,
always
uh, uh.
falling, but never getting closer because you're always just skirting around. And so an orbit is really this beautiful thing. It's this balance, and you are and you think so. That's why they like.
How do you escape orbit? How do you get out of orbit unless you
Oh, then
have some kind
you
of
have to go a little
artificial
faster.
thrust?
You
Yeah,
have to
so
go a
unless you
little
have some kind of
faster.
propulsion. But how do objects how do other objects unless, for example, stuff collects in orbit and then it becomes heavy enough that they could break off on their own? Or that doesn't happen? Like, how
No,
does anything like
what do you mean by that?
let's say hypothetically we're going, you have garbage, massive
Yeah.
junk floating around Earth, right, in Earth's orbit. If over time it kind of like got built up, right, became heavier than the individual parts that were orbiting, could that new weight, that new mass, be collect enough speed or inertia, I guess, to break out of the orbit?
The only way, see, but the thing is, something would have to affect its speed. You would have to add a force. So something would have to push it,
Well, the new
um,
weight would be the
to it.
force, no?
Yeah, no.
Not enough.
Uh, it's all moving at the same speed, and yes, it's more massive, but
So how do you get
it's not
space
adding to its velocity.
I see. I see. And so how do things end up traveling through space? That's through explosions and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah, there could be many things, but so the Artemis II mission that just went to the
Yeah,
moon,
yeah.
first it went up into Earth orbit, and, it did a couple orbits around the Earth, and they tested some stuff out, and then when they wanted to leave Earth orbit, they burned their rockets again,
Yes.
and then that
Right.
gave them enough speed that now they still weren't completely detached from the Earth, just like the moon isn't,
Right.
but it put them in a different path where this path could go all the way out to the moon and around it and then back to the Earth. Here's another one of the conspiracy things. They're like, how could that rocket be carrying enough fuel to go all the way to the moon and back?
Yeah, that was a question that people asked.
But you know what? But it's a very simple answer. They're
Yeah.
not burning fuel the whole way. They burn it at the beginning, and then they get on they hit a certain speed, and they're headed in a certain direction, and then they just coast the
I
whole
see.
way.
There are a
And
lot
then
of
at a certain point, the moon's gravity was pulling it in. And then when they came back
Ah,
around and they started heading towards and then they did a little burn to break away from the moon,
yeah,
and then they're basically headed to the Earth, and the closer they get, the stronger the gravity is. So the
right.
closer almost the whole time they're coasting. The size of the rocket, the reason the rocket is this big and they're in a little capsule at the top, that's how much fuel it took to
Yes.
get up to that speed. Once you hit that speed, you turn off the engines and you just coast. And every once in a while, they correct their course with a little,
Yeah.
seriously, just a little.
Like Wally with his fire extinguisher.
Yeah, totally. It's the same thing. And
Right.
there are all sorts of conspiracies. But the thing is, it always comes back
Yeah, that's
to,
great, but I
oh,
never
you don't
heard
know the
that.
basic
But no
science.
one ever sits down and says that, and that's really, really great information, and like I said, and you know what? I think it's insane that I have to be 30 years old on a podcast
A
with a cold call
comedian.
email to you to hear the answers to this question
Yeah.
instead of just having a textbook and just being like, "This is what the answer is." Like, I don't
I know.
understand why
Well,
that's
the
not
thing is, if you take a physics class, you do learn this stuff. That's the thing.
That's a good
These
answer.
people that are doing this, that's why I say you were never good. And I don't mean to insult.
No, I'm not.
'Cause
I was not.
yeah,
By the way, that's why I'm revisiting this now because I was not, and I think to myself, I've got to be a. And I've said this about everyone else in different contexts. If I'm bad at something when I'm 15, I have to be a moron not to look at it again when I'm 25 or 30. Like you have to be like to write it off for the rest of your life because you weren't good at it
right.
while you were in the middle of developing, and like you have no idea where your brain development was at that point. Like,
I
so I'm
know.
revisiting this stuff and I'm loving it. I'm loving every minute of everything that I've been learning
Well, let me
with
tell
this
you
stuff.
another thing they'll say, like sometimes they're like, "Ugh, you're telling me this craft is going 17,000 miles an hour or 25,000 miles an hour and it's not crushing the people inside." Here's another thing about physics. When you're coasting, you feel nothing. It's only when you're accelerating. Like when
Oh,
you're on an
cool.
airplane,
Mhm.
when you start to take off and you're only going 70 miles an hour, you're pressed back into your seat, right?
Yeah.
But when you're up in the sky, see, here's the thing. It's like people don't think like when you're up in the sky going 600 miles an hour, you don't feel anything. You can walk down the aisle and you feel nothing because you're not accelerating. You're just maintaining like a 600. And it's like, you realize like you feel nothing at 600. You felt something at 60. In a car, you
Yeah.
floor it. You feel acceleration. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. When a force is acting, as soon as you turn it off, you're just coasting. And that's how.
And so
So
everyone
when they
gets sick the
rounded,
first part of it, right?
yes. Oh, at that first part of it, they feel like several times the Earth's gravity, like several G's, and they were pressed. But at a certain point, they cut the engines, and now they're just floating, and they're going like 17,000 miles an hour or whatever. When they were coming back, they got up to this speed and they headed to the moon. And they cut their engines. The whole time they're headed to the moon, they're slowing down because the Earth is still pulling on them.
Right.
So their speed was gradually decreasing because the Earth is still
Yeah.
pulling.
Yeah.
And then they got
That's
into
so
this,
cool
they
to
went
think
around the
about.
moon. And then when they started heading back, they slowed down to like 900 miles an hour. At least I saw the thing.
Yeah.
And then they were heading back to Earth, starting at about 900 miles an hour. And basically, they're coasting and they're getting closer and closer to Earth. And the closer you get, the
You get
stronger the
faster.
gravity is. And
It's
they're
yeah.
accelerating. So
Oh,
by the
man.
time they hit the atmosphere, they were going 25,000 miles an hour,
And that's
which
why
is
it always
insane.
goes into flames, right?
But it was virtual. They're just falling the
Oh,
whole time.
amazing.
They're falling towards the Earth. And when they got really close, it's really pulling them in. But then they hit the atmosphere and this was in the frictionless vacuum of space. But when you hit the atmosphere,
Yeah,
now
you can
you
look
start
see the whole
slowing
thing.
down incredibly, and all this heat and the
Oh,
heat shields.
man. So that makes I mean, by the way, all this makes Elon's, like, reusable rockets, like, all the more incredible, right? Because, I mean, you're
It really
thinking
is.
about everything that he's gotta combat and fight, while in order to do that, and you're like, on one hand, okay, that's cool. On the other hand, when you're like when you even just this conversation, it and the way I like to think about this, or the example I like to give is, my dad's been a car junkie my whole life, and, like, he used to come home with these vintage cars he'd find on eBay, and, like, I would look at it, and I would see one thing, and he'd look at the exact same thing and see a lot more than, and, like, we're looking at the same object, but our understanding, our perception of it is so fundamentally different. I think that one of the incredible that's why education and learning
Same
is
with any piece of
beautiful.
art.
Yes.
What a piece of art means to you, you might
Yes.
focus on, "Oh, wow, I'm focusing on the relationship of the guy with his father," but you're focusing on,
Yeah.
some other aspect of the film.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredible. Incredible. And so I think that there's tremendous value in even having these conversations because it gives me a whole new depth of understanding and appreciation for stuff like this. I have 2 questions I wanna ask you because I'm having so much fun with this. Number 1 is we know oh man, there's so many ways to go. We know that it takes a long time. Our technology, what we're capable of is far greater than what we've implemented into society, right? Um, what do you think the process is like to implement new science into society? Because again, people kind of almost have this a little bit of inherent pushback, or there is pushback to new things, new technologies in particular, especially if old ways are threatened. And two, I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. Uh, what do you think the odds are that they'll be in space throughout their lives based on where we are and where our potential is? Because and the 2 questions are bridged by the fact that I'm sure we could get there, and I'm sure that, we have, between nuclear energy, robotics, AI, like the way that the pace that we're growing and developing, it's really just gonna be a question of, are we implementing it in time for this generation to really be able to kind of explore beyond where any of us have ever been before?
Yeah, I hate like we should move beyond the flat earth moon denying thing, but everything connects a little bit to it. And one of the things is people are always like, "Oh, right. We went to the moon in the 60s and we never went back. Why?" and all these things. And it's like because it's insanely expensive. Like the science
Well, not with alternative energies.
maybe, but well, right now we don't have anything that compares to burning rocket fuel. Like maybe nuclear power. There might be some new technology,
Magnetics,
but for
nuclear.
now, to get up into space now, private enterprise, SpaceX and others have helped bring down the cost of
Yeah.
just getting to orbit. But going to the moon, it's the funny thing is, like, the science and math was worked out a long time ago. It's an engineering problem. Like, sometimes we're like, "Oh, no." It's like where they think why it's so funny that it's like, this isn't hard. You can just do the math. If we burn this much fuel for this long, we'll hit this velocity, and then we can coast to the moon. It's like the actual ideas were worked out. But the engineering and
Yeah.
pulling it off, that's hard and it's expensive, and the reason we did it in the '60s because we were in a space race with Russia, and we were trying to outdo each other. So, the problem with so many things is this isn't a science problem.
That's
As far as the
interesting.
science goes, we could go to Mars and the moon all the time. It's a
Yeah.
political problem. It's what are we willing to spend money on? And it's the same thing with income inequality. Sometimes people are like,
It
why are you
makes
wasting
no
money on
sense.
NASA when you could? It's like, you know what? If they cut NASA's entire budget tomorrow, it's not gonna help our healthcare because that's a political thing. The money isn't being allocated that way.
Yeah.
But it's not because of NASA
Yeah.
or the environment, it's a political decision.
That's
So
interesting.
That's
Well,
the
yeah,
problem.
it's really
It's
interesting.
like, wow, our future could be astounding. Your kids could be, yeah,
We have to
maybe
remove the
space or
shackles. We have
it
we
could
have our
be some,
shackles on.
yeah. But
I the
it has to
example.
be, do we have the will and the political will to, like, "Hey, let's spend the money on that," instead of, if just think, if we took that military budget and we put it
I
towards
would
going to
be
Mars, we'd
thrilled.
be at Mars tomorrow.
I would be thrilled. I'd be thrilled. But the way that the example that came to my head while you're describing this is, you know, the amount of time it takes to come up with a great song, right? To be creative with the song, and then the next day it turns out that it's really easy for every other kid to play, right? But you still got to learn how to play an instrument in order to play the song. So you can have the song can exist, the riff can exist, the tabs or the notes can all be there, but someone's got to learn how to play the instrument in order to actually bring it back to life again.
That's it.
Um,
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy. I like it.
Thank you. I just thought of it while you were saying that because I think
Yeah.
it's really what it is, because one of the things I learned was, like, I'm watching, I picked up guitar when I was, like, 24, I think, and I'm going to actually I'm switching to piano, I hope, I've always felt more of a connection to
Do
it,
it.
but
Do both, but keep the guitar
I'm
going.
gonna do it for sure, but one thing I learned was, like, these riffs, Norwegian Wood by the Beatles, right? And I'm like, I love that riff, and I'm like, "Oh, that's pretty easy to play," and I'm like, but imagine coming up with that riff, and then, like, I had to learn guitar for 3 years before I could even think about trying to replicate it. So, I
Yeah.
think that, like everything, there's no shortcut to greatness, there's no shortcut to success. Just because it's been done doesn't mean that it doesn't require more effort to be replicated, right? Like, the
Yeah.
same way that it takes to learn something like that. Um, Before I let you go, because I know we're almost there, can you give me a couple of your favorite or most accurate, I love this question, accurate and least accurate, sci-fi movies, as far
Oh.
as, this kind of stuff concerned. Because while you were describing, I thought of while you're describing the orbiting, Interstellar, that scene with Matt Damon where they were orbiting and he was trying to also make that connection with the space station before it explodes. You know the scene I'm talking about?
Give me more. I saw it, but it's been a long time.
It
So
was they were visiting the water planet, they find
yeah,
Matt Damon in space, and he was like this he was this abandoned, astronaut trying to find a viable home for people, and one of the ways that and they only had a certain amount of fuel, and so they had to basically time their release, the whatever fuel they had left at the exact right time in their, orbit to be able to break off to head towards the safe base where they had to go. But it was all a matter of exact timing, and you had very limited fuel. But whatever. Your opinion anyway. Your favorites and least favorites as far as accuracy and least accuracy.
well, there's a lot to this because I've been a science fiction fan forever.
Uh
I don't know if that's technically a true statement. Maybe not forever,
huh.
but since very young and growing up, the science fiction that I gravitated towards the most was where it's often called hard SF, hard science fiction, but not because it's hard. It specifically means that's the genre of science fiction where the science really matters, where the author cares about scientific accuracy
Right.
and also where the science is an essential part of the story. Like like this it's a kind of science fiction where the science matters and it's central to the story and everything. And so I was reading people like Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke and Robert Heinlein and and I liked this science fiction. And I wasn't really into fantasy
Hmm.
and this other stuff. But then as I got older, I started discovering some other writers who it's not about the scientific accuracy, but it's like, "Oh my god, what an amazing book." Philip K. Dick and a guy named Roger Zelazny, who wrote a kind of fantasy and science fiction. Philip K. Dick was this amazing writer with the weirdest mind, and what made his stuff great, it wasn't the scientific accuracy. So, like these guys and there's newer people like a guy named Joe Haldeman and Robert J. Sawyer are some guys I know that are great modern science fiction writers who they care about the science,
Sure.
um, and fantastic stuff. Um and then but I discovered Philip K. Dick, and you go, "Oh, it's weird." Like, do you remember, like, a lot of movies now have been based on his stuff, like Total Recall,
Mhm.
Blade Runner, Minority Report, and
I
a whole
love
bunch of
Minority
others.
Report.
And, like so, like, in Total Recall, like, where maybe there's a taxi now, some of this is starting to be where it could be pretty realistic, but where you have, like, the taxi is having a conversation with you, it's, like, basically robotic,
We're
or
not far from
there's
that.
a guy who he's behind on his rent, so his front door refuses to open unless
Not
he
far
puts
from
in a
that either.
nickel. Yeah, some of this stuff is starting to be like, you're like, everything is we are moving into a Phil Dickian world is a word. Here's the thing, what his stuff wasn't essentially about the science accuracy. It was more about exploring philosophical ideas. He was really interested in what it means to be human. What happens if you have an alien or a robot who is way nicer than this human who's an asshole?
Yeah,
And like a woman's short story, a woman, the government comes to this woman, and her husband came back from being an astronaut and going to Mars or something, and they're pretty sure he's not she notices he's not the same. He was
right.
kind of an asshole, and now ever since he's come back, he's really nice, and he's nice to the kid, and he's all this, and the government is like, "We think he's been replaced by a Martian," and she's gonna testify against him, but at the last minute, she realizes, "Well, I don't care if he's an alien or not, he's much nicer," and so she's like, "I don't know what you're talking
Ooh,
about, he's the same." And there's stuff like that where
that's so
in
interesting.
Blade Runner where Rachel doesn't realize she's a robot, a replicant.
Mhm.
She has implanted memory. So he's always exploring these ideas. It wasn't about the scientific accuracy. So just to say that I still love science that like sci-fi that takes an idea and
Yeah,
extrapolates. You go, "Oh my god, you're right. Like, what
yeah.
if?"
Well,
And let's treat this
Brave New
super
World is the best
scientifically
example
like
of that.
The Martian tries to do that, and I haven't seen the Hail Mary.
Oh, by the way, I I wanted to like it.
Everybody
It
seems
was
to
like
love it.
I know, it was like 45 minutes longer than it needed to be, I think, or
Really?
like it was almost 3 hours. I went with my wife, my dad, and my 15-year-old brother, and all 3 got mad at me because the movie was too long, and
Huh.
I was like but Ryan Gosling was amazing. The science was really, really good. The story was really great. It just felt like the director or the editors or something with the pacing or whatever, that just felt a little too long, like an hour too long, but an hour is a long time to
Okay,
be in
well,
a
that's
movie
good to
theater.
know. I wanna see it, I
You
just
should
haven't
see
yet.
it. You should see it. It's really I really applaud Amazon because they did a good job with it.
So
Um,
given that, one of
yeah,
my favorite, like, sci-fi movies, probably Blade Runner. Again, not because of I don't even I'm not even looking at it through the lens of, is it scientifically accurate?
right.
You're just immersed in
It's
a
the world building.
world that is so amazing,
Yeah,
visually stunning, and
yeah.
then you have these artificial people that are indistinguishable or even better than humans, and it's just like the script is beautiful, and it's just like, so it's not about the scientific accuracy. Another one of my favorites is Galaxy Quest, which I think is the funniest science fiction film.
I don't think I've
And it's
ever seen
just
it.
you've never seen Galaxy
I
Quest?
don't think I have.
Put it on your list. It's for the whole family.
Yeah, should
It's
I show my high school
so
students?
funny. It's the funniest science fiction film, and everyone it's gotta be Tim Allen's best performance, and Tony Shalhoub is hilarious, and I love him, and Sigourney Weaver's in it, and Alan Rickman, and
Oh, it's
I
a great
mean,
cast.
it's a great cast, and it's hilarious.
I'll check it out. I have to check it
It's
out.
so funny, and it's for everyone. Um,
Definitely.
but, 2001, people always hold up as maybe the greatest and the most scientific that's a great film. It's a
Mhm.
great film and painstaking attention to detail, like
Right. I
but then
like what you were
allowing
saying.
for this AI that goes kinda crazy
Yeah,
with
that's a little scary, but
conflicting and stuff.
that's a little bit more I prefer space stories to rogue AI stories
What are
personally.
some of yours? Like, do you have an answer to that question, or is that just a question for me?
Um I loved Interstellar. I really like I
Yes.
really like the way that you described that you appreciate the world building and how, like, science catches up with the science fiction, part of life, and, like, the thing that always jumps out to me was, like, Brave New World, where, like, the genetically modified humans of, like, separating classes before they're even born, and, I mean, you think about the world today, and it really, really, really is it's not far off from being and, Aldous Huxley wrote that before there were computers, like, I mean, I don't even know when he wrote that, but,
Yeah.
he wrote that, like, in the 30s or the 40s, I think, something like that, but
You know,
Interstellar.
Interstellar, they had really good science consultants, including a Nobel Prize winner, Kip Thorne. And so the visualization and the company that did the visualization and stuff of the black hole, they were painstaking in trying to be accurate there. And the fact that relativity, time
Mhm.
passes at a different rate when you're really close to a black hole, and
Yeah.
that stuff, as crazy as it seems, they strove for scientific accuracy and incredible world building too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 and you know what? And I'm more interested it's so funny. I think the movies have always scared me, but I am really interested in extraterrestrial or ultra some kind of form of that type of life. I'm really excited for Spielberg's new movie. I'm really, really looking forward to it.
Which
Um,
movie?
Spielberg has a new movie coming out called The Age of Disclosure about,
Oh, does he?
yeah, and, my last question I wanted to ask you was, do
Y
you think
can I say but right before is that I left out a sci-fi guy
Yes,
that
please.
I loved so much in the '70s and '80s, Larry Niven. His stuff, he was a mathematician, and he had there's always black holes and neutron stars and all this astrophysics stuff, but then, you know what, a couple little nuggets that have stuck with me, they have more to do with this other aspect of science fiction
Yeah,
where you extrapolate. So, like, this isn't part of the main story, but in this novel, there's a guy in prison. What happens is on Earth is, we have really good organ transplants at this point. So what they start doing is when they take prisoners, if you're in prison, you could get the death penalty and they would harvest your organs. And so imagine I'm a good citizen. I'm not going to get arrested for anything. So why not vote the death penalty for armed robbery? Or any other crime,
sure.
and because then there will be more organs available to keep me close
Wow,
to immortal,
wow.
and so there's a part where a guy is on a colony world, and he's reading that back on Earth, they've instituted the death penalty for too many traffic violations. So it's like science fiction, like, extrapolates like that.
Yeah,
You go, "Oh, what
amazing,
would happen
amazing.
if we had really good organ transplants?" Then you would be like, "Well, I'm not gonna commit a crime. Let's harvest all those criminals' organs.
Yeah,
Let's make it" okay. And one other one is, he had this other novel, and there's this tiny little thing I think about when I take a shower. He has someone on the moon. The moon has 1/6 the Earth's gravity,
okay,
right? So,
yeah,
and so when a guy gets out of the shower, because of how water, uh tension like water collects and like on the ISS, like water won't just disperse everywhere. It has a tendency to collect. And you know how
mhm.
water forms like shapes like that? It's because attracted its adhesion or cohesion, I forget.
As in
But
it collects together.
yeah.
Yeah,
So when
okay.
the guy gets out of the shower, there's like a quarter-inch sheath of water stuck to him. When you get out of the water, there's a shower, there's a little water on you
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
might
yeah.
brush it off. Well, on the moon with 1/6 the gravity, there's
Oh,
way more water.
crazy,
And so he's like,
crazy.
whoosh, and like all this water falls off.
So
And I was
cool.
like, I love little things like that, that you go, oh my God, you really thought this through to a level of like, that goes from the physics
Yeah,
to something
I
so
admire that.
personal as, like, taking a shower and wiping the water off.
Totally.
I
There's
love
a
it.
there's an amazing book called The Anxious Generation, and the introduction to the book by Jonathan Haidt, and he talks about, social media and mental health with kids and stuff, but the first thing that the first example he gives is your kid has an opportunity to grow up in Mars, and he goes through all the potential thing. He goes, but growing up in Mars, gravity's gonna be different. The way that they're, the reason why our legs are shaped, our bodies are shaped the way they are is because our legs are strong for getting pulled down and constantly have to keep ourselves up. And he goes, and our eyes are gonna be different, and like the structure of our face is gonna be different. He goes, so do you want your kid growing up in a planet, and I'm like, I didn't even think about any of
Oh,
this, but
yeah.
just the ability to, yeah.
Larry Niven also had, like, people working out in the asteroid belt. Let's say they're miners. They're mining the asteroids.
Yeah.
Well, after generations of that, those people are getting tall and thin because they're not living in much
Oh, man.
gravity. And
Yeah.
then you really probably, after a while, like, if you're a few generations down and you probably you might not be able to visit Earth because the gravity you wouldn't be able to handle the gravity.
Wow.
Um,
Oh,
yeah.
man, it's so much fun, all this stuff, but you know what? That's why I think, like, you hear such I mean, you hear there are really compelling extraterrestrial stories, There's an amazing documentary called Moment of Contact, and it was and the head neurosurgeon of this hospital in Brazil, I believe, who is totally sober-minded, totally sane, spoke in front of Congress a couple of months ago, like a month or 2 ago, and part of his presentation was all his associates for the last 25 years basically speaking to his character and his well-being. He's like, "I had eyes on an extraterrestrial for 4 minutes in, like, 1995 or something like that when there was a crash." And he describes it, and, like, they look humanoid, and the funny thing about, and I've heard this from, there's some really fun UFO type podcasts. American Alchemy with Jesse Michaels is incredible, and Danny Jones is always entertaining. His guests are always, I go back and forth on like what I think, but they're always
I did
entertaining.
not like the episode where I've only seen a little of him, and where I
Which
keyed
one?
into him was he had Charlie Duke, and he had
Yes,
the
yes.
main
He
guy
he
that's a
said that
moon
he was
landing
disappointed in that episode
denier.
too. He said that he was very upset with how he was not happy with how that went. He said the whole thing was a nightmare, and he
That
goes,
guy was he's always been disrespectful. He got punched by
Birdside
famously
Bell,
got
whatever his
punched
name
by
is.
Buzz
Yeah,
Aldrin for hounding him
yeah,
and
yeah.
calling him a liar and all this, and the thing is, it's like, you don't understand the science. You know what? The thing you said about music and how once somebody writes it, it might be very easy to play if
Uh-huh.
you've spent
Played
10
into
years
it.
learning how to
Yeah,
play.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's the same thing with the science stuff. It's like, "Oh, wow, you seem interested in the subject. Why don't you actually try to learn some science, and then you'll know which stuff, 'Oh, that I was wrong about, but here I'm still wondering about this,'" learn the
Yeah.
science because when we're in these flat earth groups, some of the time you're like, it's so frustrating because you go, "Oh, I don't even know how to talk to you because clear." It's as if you're talking to someone and you're talking about baseball and they keep talking about the quarterback or what quarter of the game is this? And you go, this person doesn't know the first thing about baseball. And
Right,
he's
right.
like, you're like, absolute, like, and you go, "Oh, I don't know how to handle this even," because
Yeah,
it's like
he does
clear
not
you're acting like you're an
defend
expert, but you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
he does not defend that debate. He was like, "That debate," he goes, "I love the idea." He goes, "In theory, it would have been so much fun." He was like, "It was not a performance that I was happy with." But, I I think I want there's a website called Kalshi, and Polymarket. These are live betting, based on different events that people think are gonna happen, right? So, like 70% chance that, the war with Iran is over, within the month or not. I just made up that number. I'm not sure if it's true or not.
Right.
But, I think according to Kalshi, a bunch of months ago, it was up to, I think, 70% or I don't know if I'm making up a number. It was a high number, higher number than I would have expected, that Trump makes an announcement, uh, basically acknowledging and recognizing that extraterrestrials and UFOs are real. What are the odds you think that happens? Do you think it's gonna happen before 2027? Yes or no?
I don't think so. Um,
Would you be surprised if it did happen?
oh, yeah. My here's
Because of the politics or because of reality? Do you think in reality they're not here? You think that politically the president of the United States is not gonna get up and say, "Hey, there's extraterrestrials, hanging out in society among us."
Well, here's the thing. I've been interested in the subject of UFOs since I was a little kid.
Okay.
So we're talking like 5 decades.
Okay.
Well, so sometimes I've seen people recently, like younger, like journalists,
Sure.
like popular people talking on YouTube and stuff. And I want to say that a lot of them are younger and they're very optimistic that because you keep hearing people coming out that it's like we're on the edge. There's the age of disclosure the
Yeah. You should watch
documentary.
it if
And
you haven't seen it, by the way.
I
It's really
haven't
fun.
seen it yet. So the thing is, some of them, Bill Maher is convinced 100%, absolutely, there's no question that they're real at this point, and it's like, that's overstating the case, and here's the thing, my opinion is tempered by the fact that I've been hearing the same stuff for 50 years,
Yeah.
and the real evidence has never it's always been
I know. It's
great
more
stories.
credible
What
people with
about this
no.
story and this
Yeah.
story? And these people seem credible, but there's never a hunk of metal from a spaceship that absolutely couldn't have been made on Earth. Like, where's the extraordinary claims require extraordinary
Sure,
evidence.
sure, sure,
This
sure.
is so, and one thing I hate is when people on the other side of it say they tend to do this. It's a very disingenuous argument. You go, ah, so you don't think there's life in the universe given the size of the universe? And it's like, that's not at all what we're talking about. That's a completely different
Yeah.
topic.
The question is
I
whether it
think
crash
most
landed on Earth and poked you
physicists
or not.
right, most physicists and astrophysicists think the universe is vast and there's
Yeah.
probably life out there.
Probably
That's
pulling
not
the
what we're
life.
talking about. We're
Yeah.
talking about whether aliens have come to
I
Earth.
know, right? So that's my
Completely
question. So
different
that's the
subject.
question. So you don't you're skeptical.
I'm maintaining a healthy skepticism. I want to believe.
I want to
And
believe
so many of
too.
these other people that don't believe, they want to. Of
I want
course
yeah.
we want contact with aliens. We want confirmation of
Would
it,
you
and we
believe
want
it? Would you believe it if Trump gets up? Would you and says that, or do you think this is a political shtick and we forget about it? Because
if
the
they make
government
an
left and
announcement like
right has
that
lied a lot, left and
exactly.
right forever.
If
So I
if
don't know
they
if I
just
believe anything
say
they
it
say.
if they just say it and they don't provide any new evidence,
Forget about it.
then I'm extremely skeptical because at this point, show us the evidence. Not a video, not a black and white Tic Tac video that people have
Yeah.
debunked pretty reasonably where, yeah, it looks like it's moving fast. That's parallax. Just like, you know what
Well,
I mean? Like,
I think there are. I believe there are, and not even just American, but all over the world. There are military. There are like military records and documentation that are keeping up with these things moving very fast. We have no evidence to say that it's necessarily extraterrestrial, as opposed to some kind of, maybe
maybe,
weapons development or whatever. But like this could be.
the
Yeah.
Tic Tac one, for instance, that looks like and they're like, "Woo, look at it go." There's a guy named Mitch
Hedberg.
what's this what? No,
I'm just
you
kidding.
know
He's a
what, by
comedian.
the way, Hedberg was a good friend of mine.
No, he wasn't. Really?
That's a whole other subject.
Oh, you can't do that to me an hour and 35 minutes in. Really? He
Yeah,
was Can you tell me a little bit about him?
yeah.
I love
Um,
him. I loved his work, man. Oh, man. How'd you know him?
so I first met him, we were working at a comedy club in Wichita, Kansas called
Sure.
Slapsticks with an X, STIX,
Yeah.
Slapsticks. Funny comedy club names. He was the opening act. I was the middle act, and then there was a headliner,
No
and we
way.
worked a week together. And so comedy clubs typically, let's say it's a show like a 3-act show and everyone came from out of town,
Yeah.
typically either give you each a hotel room or they keep an apartment. Like, sometimes it's better for them if they just keep an apartment and you share an apartment. So I
Right.
lived with him for a week while we worked this club. We really hit it off. We were both living in LA and we just became he was one of my best friends for years. We had a little bit of a falling out and we got a little estranged as he got into drugs that were a little beyond the drugs that I was interested in. Um, he separated himself from people he had been close with, you
Yeah.
know,
That's common
and
behavior,
which
I've
makes
heard.
sense,
Yeah.
because it's like, "Why are you doing heroin, my friend?"
Yeah.
Um,
Heartbreaking.
so, we just hit it off. We liked a lot of the same stuff. We were both into music and comedy um
Was
and
his
we just
personality similar to his stage performance? Was he like kind of
yeah.
that like deadpan, like deadpan but like twinkle in his eye goofy kind of style, or was he that was just the way he performed, do you think?
Yeah, like a lot of people, I would say, and especially it evolved because I met him early enough in his career where he didn't command the stage as much. Like he was a little shyer and not as on. But over those next years, the
Uh-huh.
writing was always really funny. And then he got better and better at commanding an audience.
Yes, yes.
And so he became stronger. But when I met him, here's one of the reasons we became friends too is that he was easy to follow because he was very low energy and subtle and clean. So I got gigs where I was headlining and I could bring some, so I would bring him. He became more famous than me, but for a
Yeah.
while there, I brought him on gigs.
So
And then
cool.
later I middled for him as he headlined.
Wow.
But that's why we traveled. I was in so many places with him and had so many adventures. Um, so I would say that, like maybe this is true of a lot of us. Like what we are on stage, some people are a total character on stage. Other people, we strive to be ourselves on stage, but it might not be exactly how you are off stage, like a distillation
Yeah.
of your best self or something. So, like the way he was on stage, there's a little bit about his delivery and everything that's maybe it's a little exaggerated, but I think that
The essence was
it's
there.
yeah, the essence is there, and that, that's his sense of humor, and here's something about him, he might say, the F word, like, he might have cussed on stage sometimes, but one thing you might notice is he never had any bodily function humor, like, no fart jokes,
Yeah.
nothing like that, and this is very unlike most men. He didn't like that off stage, like, he wouldn't make you know, I know plenty of people that would make guys that would make fart jokes off stage, but maybe they don't in their act, or
Yeah.
maybe they do. But
Yeah.
Mitch, it's like, nah, he just didn't like that kind of humor, and so, like, he might cuss, but he didn't tell fart jokes off stage or on stage.
That's good. I'm
He
happy to
wasn't
hear
into bodily
that.
function humor. He liked his weird thoughts and a lot of
Yeah.
times about just minutia, Kit
Yeah.
Kat bars and
That's right.
M&Ms and koala bears and
And my neighbor knocked on the wall because the music was too loud. He said, "Go
yeah.
around." I don't know
My
what's on your
my
side, it's only a wall here.
I know, one of his classics that I just think is an amazing joke structurally,
Uh-huh.
because out of nowhere, it doesn't just have a regular setup and then a punchline. It just starts with, "I think Bigfoot is blurry. That's the problem." It's not
Yes, I love
the
that
first,
joke.
"I think Bigfoot is blurry." 5 words, no setup like, "Hey, when you see those videos of Bigfoot and
Yeah,
how he's
yeah,
and, like, a comic might write a joke this way and go, "Well, what if it's because he's blurry?" But instead, those 5 words, boom, hilarious punchline, and then everything he says is funnier and funnier and funnier. Maybe, that's the problem. It's not the photographer's fault. Bigfoot is
right.
blurry, and
That
that's extra
ah.
scary, yeah, and it's just like, that joke structurally is so funny to me.
So as you're performing something like that, because that joke, especially, is what aside from being brilliant and funny, will take the audience a second to understand that that is the joke, right? Like, there's always the delivery, and then it's like everyone like you could see it hit them. You see it like dawn across their faces and dawn across their eyes, like, oh, that's the joke. What is it? What do you do to deliver that joke in that, like, pause time? Do you is it like a performance where, like, you hold? Is it like is it do you have, like, what do you do when you know that a joke is gonna take a second for the audience to get?
I don't know that there's a single answer. I think, like, each joke might be a little different, but, um, that's just, that's part of writing and performance. They're 2
Right.
different ways, because sometimes when a joke isn't working, when you have a f so, you have a funny idea, and sometimes you go to the stage and it's like, you can't make it work.
Yeah.
Well, okay, first of all, is the idea actually funny? Is
Right.
there a funny idea there? But let's say that you actually have a funny idea, but you're not sure how to get it across. So that's like, how do I write this to communicate what I find so funny here? How do I make the audience see what and it's an art thing. It's like, I want you to see the world the way I see it. I
Mhm.
I'm looking at this and I'm finding it very funny. You don't yet. But so I got to find the right words, and then also delivery can make a huge difference. It's like,
Yeah.
what can I also do to communicate this idea? Um,
I watched Mark Norman's new special recently on Netflix, and one thing that I noticed, and he always did this, but you could see he's kind of taking it to a new level as he, matures as a comic, is he holds poses for punchlines and he does it really well with like a lot of body language. And so like if he's saying like a line that he knows is gonna get resistance to, like he almost like plants himself in like I'm gonna stand up for this joke kind of way, or like, whoa, didn't mean to take you there. And like he'll do these things that bring you in with him to
yeah.
like so it's not just the content, it's the you're literally drawing people in. And one thing I noticed, my wife and I went to see Tom Segura in the Hard Rock, and every motion, every time he rolled one of his eyes or both his eyes, they all 5,000 people or 7,000 people, wherever it was, every single eyeball was watching that eye roll, and you felt it in the room, and you're like, this guy is not only a writer, this guy is, like, the most skilled performer, like, he is, like,
Right.
it's incredible to watch, so, I
Yeah, so
totally
I
get what you're
think Mitch
saying.
has both of those too, because a lot of his jokes, they're just so funny. You can just read them on paper and they are funny. Others, maybe they're not as funny, but his delivery helps make it
Yeah,
funny. I don't know,
yeah,
like, but,
yeah.
I really love so many, like, the simple ones of, like, when someone hands me a flyer, it's like they're saying, "Here, you throw this away." It's just so simple, and I was just listening to he had a really old one about I think he had a paper route or something, and he goes, "I was supposed to go to 2,000 houses or 2 dumpsters," which is almost related to that other one, or, I like to play tennis. The depressing thing about tennis is I know I'll never be as good as a wall.
Right.
It's like some of them are just so, um yeah, some of them seem jokier than others. Some just seem like it's just a sentence, but it always plays very funny.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. He's definitely a great for sure, and it was a tragedy that he died so yeah, he died
Well,
late.
you'll be happy to know, a guy who's well, now he's a friend of mine, Jeff Siegel. There's a documentary that's almost finished.
Oh, sweet. So
That's
exciting.
sometime maybe in the next year or something, we'll see it somewhere, a major Mitch Hedberg documentary.
Okay, that's
I'll
really
be in it
exciting
as
to
well as, uh, an unbelievable he interviewed everyone, so he interviewed everyone, so
uh,
it'll be a
I'm
fascinating
I'm
one.
looking forward to it. That's gonna be awesome. Brian, this is so much fun. I would love to have you back sometime in the future because I
Sure.
really had such a
I know,
blast.
I think we ran out of time, there's so much more to talk about.
I was about to say, we ran out of time, we went overtime, but I love these are the conversations that I love having. These are the podcasts that make me wanna keep on going, and,
Excellent.
I
It
really
was fun
appreciate your
talking to
time.
you.
This is a ton of fun. Thank you so much. Okay.